this is the plan for today. We will give out your exam 3 at the end of this, maybe in office hour after this. Depends on if there's any section after this class. So technically we have to finish around 10, but if there's no class after this or like section like us after this, we can just stay here. And then we plan out to give you exam 3. And since there's a lot of material to cover and we want to do a really good job to help you guys do well on the final, it's 50% of your score. We plan to, don't say that word, it's early in the morning, I had not my coffee yet. We will split the section in half, which means that I was planning to do my part on Friday, separate. So this whole hour will be Melanie's section part. Is that okay with you? Or you want us to cram more in and just skip stuff?
Split.
Same time.
Right, so,
Same time on Friday.
9 to 10, just like normal time. So which is technically your class time, you shouldn't have anything planned for it. Unless you don't care, fine, whatever. So is that okay with you?
Yeah.
So this whole section will be Melanie's, and she's gonna go into stuff that is really important for you to remember. There's something will be very similar to your previous exam, and there's new stuff. Not technically new stuff that you learned, but you kind of didn't have to focus on your previous exam, right? So get your note out, pay attention. This is very important. You guys did really well on exam 3, just because our generous grading. It's multiple choice, but we didn't grade it multiple choice. So we split the point evenly, even on the choice that you don't have to make. So technically, even you didn't circle all of them, or you circle all of them, you technically get 3 points out of it. So some people left it open, like nothing checked, they still got 3 points. So if that's not generous, I don't know what is. So you guys did really well on your last exam. So people who tried to do well on the last exam, you did really well. Good job. Which means that one more push. So pay attention, focus, finish strong. Nothing more pity than get almost 95 on your midterms and got 50 on your final. Okay, and it's 200 points. So there's a lot of things to go through. All right, get your note out and pay attention, right? Are you sure?
Okay, so I apparently can't work computers, but anyways, I have some of the questions on my notes, so if I don't remember to ask a question, I might just go back so I can see some of your notes. We'll go from here. Okay, so we're going to jump around just a little bit. I'm going to cover everything I covered in previous review sessions and hopefully give you guys some practice questions so that way you guys are ready for this exam. Okay, so we're going to start with midterm 1 material, but we're going to start with part 2. So remember, this is all of our stuff with mTOR, AMPK, all of my master regulators. Okay, so in a fed state, right, I'm going to be undergoing amino acid sensing, and particularly involving leucine, right, and I'm going to have mTOR active. On the other hand, in a starved state, I'm going to inhibit mTOR, rather I'm going to have AMPK active, which is going to induce macroautophagy. Okay, in terms of mTOR action, mTOR overall is going to increase or decrease protein translation? Increase, okay, how are we doing that? So number 1, I need to form my 43S subunit, and this is part of my pre-initiation complex. No, you do not need to know all the steps to get to this, but overall, I have this 43S subunit. Okay, and part of this is mediated through EIF2. And remember, EIF2 is only active in its GTP-bound state, right? And it must be in its GTP-bound state to join the units of my 43S subunit. However, if it's stuck in my GDP-bound state, it's not going to be able to do this. So we talked about regulation in terms of this, and we talked about this with kind of my upstream kinases. So we talked about nutrient limitation, which activates something like GCN2, and in this case, I'm going to phosphorylate EIF2. If I phosphorylated EIF2, that means EIF2B cannot bind. If I cannot have EIF2B, I therefore cannot interchange between GDP bound and GTP bound. So if I can't interchange, this phosphorylation is going to lead to being stuck in my GDP bound state, which means I'm inhibiting protein translation. We also talked about this with ER stress, right? That activates my PERK, which is another upstream kinase. So again, same idea. I'm inhibiting protein translation by inhibiting the exchange from GTP to GTP, which means I do not get my 43S or my pre-initiation complex. Okay, but there's kind of two steps, right? So first I have this 43S subunit, but second, I need to bring this 43S subunit on so I'm able to actually undergo the translation process. So with this, we talked about mTOR regulation. So with mTOR here, we're going to be phosphorylating 4-EBP, which frees EIF4E. This then allows me to form my EIF4F complex. No, you don't need to know all the parts of that, which is going to bind to my start, or bind to before my start codon at my hairpin. mTOR at the same time is activating S6 kinase, which activates EIF4B. The combination of these allow for the recruitment of the helicase activity. I have a lot of questions about this. EIF4A is actually the helicase. You don't need to know that, but overall, we're recruiting to the start. We're able to unwind, which leads us this great big landing strip, and then I can get my 43S subunit on. Okay, mTOR overall we have an increase in mTOR activity when we have an increase in nutrients or an increase in amino acid sensing, particularly leucine. And what that means is I'm going to get an increase in protein translation. Number one, I do not have a nutrient limitation, so I don't have these upstream kinases like GCN2 on. Therefore, I can exchange and I can get my 43S subunit. Additionally, I'm able to phosphorylate 4-EBP to get free EIF4E, forming this EIF4F complex. I also activate S6 kinase, which allows for the recruitment before the stem loop opening up and my 43S can join. Okay? So overall, mTOR is leading to protein translation. How are we even activating mTOR? Two things. Number one, you could activate via insulin, right? Or nutrients can also be a direct activator. So nutrients are going to directly activate REB. On the other hand, insulin through our phosphorylation cascade, which we talked about, right, with insulin resistance again. So through IRS, PDK1, activating PKB, I'm inhibiting this TISC complex. Remember, this TISC complex is an inhibitor of REB. So if I inhibit the inhibitor, I now have an active REB and I have an active mTOR. Nutrients, on the other hand, just directly activate REB, so we kind of bypass all this, and again, we get activated mTOR, which means what for protein translation? Increase because I increased what factors? EIF2, its ability to convert from GDP to GTP, S6 kinase, and what else? EIF4E. Okay, on the other hand, if I do not have nutrients, and I no longer have my signaling from insulin, I am instead going to be inhibiting REB. The TIS complex is active. I'm going to be inhibiting REB, and I'm inhibiting mTOR. And all of this is through activation of AMPK, right? And this is from its upstream factor, LKP1. Okay, AMPK, when is this going to be active? This is really, we talked about this as a sensor, so I'm sensing AMP to ATP ratio, right? And we talked about how we sense AMP as opposed to ADP. Why? Why am I sensing AMP? Yeah, it's a more sensitive readout of the cell's status. So I'm sensing AMP to ATP, and this, as this starts to drop, and I have more AMP, less ATP, I'm going to start to activate AMPK. Overall, AMPK is going to lead to the stimulation of catabolic effects and not anabolic. So mTOR, insulin, think anabolic and building things up. On the other hand, with AMPK, I'm going to start to break these down, right? Things that are going to turn this on, so AMP to ATP ratio. We talked about leptin and adiponectin in the periphery, how maybe these would be different than in the central nervous system, although Hai will talk to you more about that. We also talked about exercise stimulating AMPK. What was that through? Yeah, the calcium-mediated kinase. Actually, it's a double kinase. Also feeding signals. We talked about like orexigenic versus anorectic effects. So all of those things are tying into activation of AMPK. Okay, this was one of Stahl's practice questions from his review session. Which of the following would activate AMPK? Berry? Yes, that was one of our natural products that stimulates AMPK. You can actually buy that on the market. Okay, resveratrol?
No.
Yes. And that's why they say perhaps red wine is beneficial, right? Physical activity. Yes, we just said that. It induces the calcium double kinase. Metformin? Mm-hmm. Good. Cacao? No, unfortunately. Rapamycin. What does rapamycin do? It inhibits mTOR, but is not a direct activator of AMPK. Okay, a direct inhibitor of mTOR does not necessarily mean a direct activator of AMPK. It's not that straightforward. Okay. Okay. We said that AMPK is going to induce catabolic processes. Okay, like what? One of these would be increasing fatty acid oxidation, right? So again, we have exercise, leptin, adiponectin. All these things are activating AMPK, which is going to lead to the inhibition of the conversion of the acetyl-CoA to malonyl-CoA through the phosphorylation of the rate-limiting enzyme, right? Acetyl-CoA carboxylase. As I decrease malonyl-CoA, this means I'm going to increase CPT1. Once again, if I get rid of the inhibitor, okay, this is now active. As I increase CPT1, I'm going to be increasing fatty acid oxidation. Okay. Another catabolic effects that we talked about was macroautophagy. So we talked about like the OAK1 complex. That's a little bit more in detail than you'll necessarily need to know. But overall, mTOR is going to inhibit macroautophagy. It's going to inhibit the formation of this vesicle at all. On the other hand, AMPK is then going to activate. So instead, AMPK activates OAK1 complex, and this is going to lead to the stimulation of this vesicle forming, which then can fuse into, say, my lysosome, and I can undergo macroautophagy. When would this be important? When would this be beneficial? In a starvation state, right? I can start to break down nutrients. When else? Potentially cancer, right? I can start to clear out reactive oxygen species. Aging, right? I need to get rid of mitochondria. Interestingly enough, macroautophagy is actually pivoted with that. But maybe also with sarcopenia, right? We talked about a downregulation of macroautophagy, which can start to lead to a decrease in mitochondria. Okay. Next, we talked about sirtuins and circadian rhythm. So overall, remember, is key SIRT1 is an NAD plus dependent deacetylase. Okay, so caloric restriction, right? We know this is going to increase my AMP ratio, which is going to increase my AMPK. Talk to me about NAMP. What is this doing?
Gets you back to any.
Yes, good, good. So we said it's an NAD plus dependent. So NAMP is going to facilitate the conversion of nicotinamide, which is an inhibitor of SIRT1, over to NAD+. And as I start increasing NAD+, I'm going to directly activate my SIRT1. Okay? Really quick before we go into that. Actually, no, I'll leave it there. Okay, this is another one of his practice questions. So you have discovered NUMBI, a novel inhibitor of NAMP. How will NUMBI affect the lifespan of calorie-restricted mice compared to untreated calorie-restricted mice? Okay, calorie restriction, what's active? Sirtuins. Great. What happens if I inhibit NAMP? Exactly. Absolutely no effect, right? If I inhibit NAMP, I'm going to be increasing nicotinamide, and this is a direct inhibitor of sirtuins. I also am going to decrease NAD+ levels, so that will, again, inhibit my sirtuin. Okay? This is the kind of question you can expect in terms of short answer, where it's going to be asking you application. Do you understand the principle behind this, and then can you apply that? Okay, we also talked about circadian rhythm. So again, you do not need to know this in great detail, but what are your key players? We talked about clock and BMAL and cry and PER. So during the day, clock and BMAL can act as transcription factors, which are going to stimulate the transcription of PER and cry. PER and cry are then going to accumulate over the day. When they have accumulated essentially to capacity, they'll become phosphorylated, which turns around and inhibits clock and BMAL interaction with our DNA. At that point, we're going to, we won't get more transcription of PER and cry. which then is going to lead to degradation. As these sit around, they'll be ubiquitinated. We're going to get rid of them. Okay, they're not inhibiting clock and BMAL. Once again, I can get transcription. So we're talking about this cycle. Okay, what kind of enzyme is SIRT1? It's a deacetylase. What's it going to do here? Okay, and what's the effect of that? Yeah, it decreases availability. So over here, we have, I think it's BMAL1 is the hat. So histone acetylase. So if I'm acetylating my histones, I now have access to my chromatin. I can open this up. I'm able to induce transcription. On the other hand, SIRT1, this is a deacetylase. If I deacetylate my chromatin, I'm no longer able to access it. Okay, so caloric restriction and starvation, if I'm activating SIRT1, I'm going to get less transcription, as well as inhibit mTOR, so I'm going to have less protein translation in the start overall. Okay, so big picture. What master regulator senses amino acids? Good. What does mTOR activate? Good, protein translation, and make sure you know through what factors. S6 kinase and EIF4E are the ones we talked about. How would activation of GCN2 affect protein translation? Good, how? Exactly. So we're inhibiting. So if I'm phosphorylating EIF2, I can't have EIF2B interact. I'm therefore going to be stuck in my GDP bound state, which means I'm no longer able to form this 43S subunit. What about ER stress? Same thing, right? I'm activating PERT, and so we're going to again be phosphorylating EIF2. What role would AMPK play in cancer pathogenicity? How would it increase tumor cell health?
Decreases it by the use of proliferation.
Exactly. So we're going to be inhibiting anabolic processes. So we're going to decrease cell growth, right? AMPK is increasing catabolic processes. Good. Okay, iron homeostasis. We're just going to bring all this up. Okay. All right, so I ingest iron. It's going to be in my Fe3 plus form. This is going to cross my brush border, and I'm going to be bound to DMT1, and I get conversion of Fe to Fe2 plus. What? I meant to put a bunch of animations on here, but I guess I did. Okay, so ferroportin then is able to transport Fe2 plus across into where? Into circulation. What's it going to be bound to? Transferrin. Good. At that point, transferrin can bind to my transferrin receptor, which is going to allow for endocytosis. What's going to happen then? Yep, in my endosome, I'm going to, once again, first of all, we're going to be brought down to my Fe2 plus state. Again, through DMT1, I can release. And at that point, I have kind of two choices. Number one, this can go out. We have heme production, iron sulfur clusters, things like that. On the other hand, I could transport out into ferritin, which is going to be my storage form, right? Okay, and then we talked about avoiding iron overload. So if I'm bound to HFE, which would be high iron protein, right? This is going to stimulate my transferrin 2 receptor on the liver. This is then going to lead to activation of hepcidin, and hepcidin is going to degrade ferroportin. If I'm degrading ferroportin, where's my iron going to remain? Yeah, in these enterocytes. And remember, these enterocytes are sloughed off really. So as I slough off these enterocytes, I'll excrete out the extra iron, right? And I'm not going to go into this iron overload state. So remember, we had a question on midterm one, what would happen if I wasn't able to produce hepcidin, right? Or if I didn't have HFE, and you should be able to walk through how that would be. Yeah.
Is it the acidity of the endosome or steep that?
It's a combination because endosome, yeah.
That turns it back into ferricide.
Yes, yeah. Steep is the mediator, and I think what steep does is it helps conjoin to pass through DMT1, but the overall acidic nature of the endosome is going to induce the same thing. Yeah, they wouldn't ask you that nitty gritty of a question, but if you're just interested, yeah. Okay. Okay, regulation. We talked about IRPs. So remember, these iron binding proteins are going to bind to IREs, or iron response elements, which are going to be in the untranslated region. So this is either 5' or 3', and that's dependent on how this guy is regulated. So as I decrease iron, these IRPs are going to become active and they're going to bind. So with ferritin, why would I want this to be in the 5' region? What happens? Inhibition, right? If I'm binding this IRP, I'm blocking my start codon. I no longer can get transcription of ferritin. On the other hand, what happens if I bind on the 3' end? Stabilization, right? So otherwise this mRNA is going to be rapidly degraded. On the other hand, if I stabilize this, I now can go ahead and translate out, okay? Does this make sense? I think we kind of beat this one to death with the Roy G. Biv, or the Roy G. Biv, thank you, RFP and GFP practice question. Roy G. Biv, it's cool, I still know my rainbow, that's good. Okay, so moving on to cholesterol synthesis. Okay, so talk to me about this. Where are SREBP and SCAP originally going to be? The ER, they're going to remain bound. What's going to free them? High or low? Low, right? So as I have low cholesterol, I'm going to have my activation of the 2 proteases, and I'm able to leave from my, where are we here? And I'm able to leave from my ER. Remember, we also talked about INSIG. What's INSIG? Yep, Ixing anchor. So I'm going to remain in my ER. Okay. So as I release my SCAP and SREBP, this is going to be translated to the Golgi. That's where I'm going to interact with my 2 proteases. And notice they're going to cleave off this head of the SREBP, which then can translocate into the nucleus. And this is going to act as a transcription factor. What am I inducing the transcription of? Yep. LDLR and HMG-CoA reductase. Why? Yeah, this is with the goal of increasing cholesterol. So if I increase LDLR, remember I can bring up more of my LDL, which is going to be contain cholesterol. On the other hand, HMG-CoA reductase, this is going to be endogenous synthesis of cholesterol. So I'm targeting this from 2 ways, exogenous and endogenous, all with the goal of increasing cholesterol levels. Okay, we also talked about our nuclear receptors. So I don't remember what my animations are, but what's the common denominator? What are these? Yep, these are transcription factors, and they're going to be activated by these small hydrophobic ligands, right? Okay, what about type 1? What's specific to type 1? Yeah, it's outside the nucleus originally, and what's it bound to?
Heat shock.
Yep, exactly. So I'm going to start in my cytosol and bound to a heat shock protein. When activated, this is going to form a homodimer, which means it's 2 of the same, right? Brought into the nucleus, and I'm going to activate transcription. What about type 2? How is this different? What was that? In the nucleus, good. So I'm originally in the nucleus. I'm going to form a heterodimer with RXR. Remember, that's always my other counterpart. This other one is interesting. So here activates transcription. Great, I've got my gas pedal. Over here, I also have a brake. So without my ligand, I'm also a repressor. So I'm going to be stopping transcription. And with the ligand, then I also am going to become a gas pedal, right? So there's kind of 2 forms of regulation here. Okay, we talked about all the different examples. I'm not going to go through this. I think you guys pretty much know this. Things we've really hit on, though, PPARs, right? We talked a lot about PPARs. We talked about vitamin D receptors. We talked a lot about retinoic acid receptors. Okay, moving on to midterm. So material part 1. Oh, okay. So insulin, overall, talk to me. What's insulin going to be doing over here? Where are my overall pathways? So what's it going to be doing to gluconeogenesis? Overall I'm going to be inhibiting. What about glycolysis? Increasing, right? I'm going to be utilizing my glucose. What about glycogen lysis? Inhibiting. There's no need. I'm not going to bring out of storage. Glycolysis? Nope, I'm inhibiting. So over here, glucose overall, I can get to glycogen storage. So I'm creating the storage form of my excess glucose. I'm also undergoing glycolysis. I can start to shuttle it out and utilize it within my different tissues. Additionally, I'm going to be stimulating lipogenesis. Right? Oh, here we go. lipogenesis, I'm increasing the amount of storage. On the other hand, inhibiting lipolysis, I don't need to burn these things. On the other hand, we have glucagon, right? And we talked about well, first of all, if I have hypoglycemia, what's my very first mode of action? Decrease insulin. What's my second? Increase glucagon. So I can start to undergo glycogen lysis. I can start to refeed back my nutrient levels. Okay, we also talked about insulin biosynthesis and secretion. You don't need to get too caught up in this. However, remember, what was the unique factor that we talked about with sensing glucose levels? Fenestrated. So remember we talked about this, I think everyone's probably sick of my analogy, but the way I think about this is if you're looking out a window, that's going to be a lot easier to assess, okay, there's like maybe 1 or 2 people in the courtyard versus now there's 10, 15. Same idea, it's able to look out in the blood and say, okay, how much glucose do I have? Rather than bringing every person into the room to count, rather than bringing all the glucose into the cell to count, it's much easier to watch it go by. And that's the idea of fenestrated, by windows of the epithelium. Okay, in order to induce insulin release, so I'm going to uptake, in a low state, I'll uptake glucose through GLUT2. This is going to undergo glycolysis, which is going to increase my ATP as well. Well, mostly we talked about ATP. When I do that, what's going to happen? Close my potassium channels. This leads to a depolarization, which opens calcium channels. As calcium opens, I then can, my insulin will then exocytose from my cell and I get overall insulin release. Okay, so what would happen, remember we had the exam question asking how could potentially we treat someone who had some sort of mitochondrial dysfunction. We talked about having sulfonylureas. Okay, well what happens if I have mitochondrial dysfunction? I can't produce ATP. Instead though, I could bypass this, close my potassium channels and get insulin release, and that's a potential diabetes treatment. Ooh. Okay, again, bringing in SIRT1, so start joining all of your material overall. It's going to inhibit UCP2. So UCP2, we didn't talk a lot about in this class, but it's necessary to have some sort of lead to maintain a proton gradient. So without this, I cannot get ATP production. If I don't have ATP production, I'm going to inhibit my potassium channel. So you have CSIRT1 directly affecting insulin release as well. All right, I spent a ridiculous amount of time making this, so I really hope the animations go well. This is one of Stahl's very favorite types of exam questions, okay? So stick with me, take pictures, whatever. So overall, I don't remember where I started. I think I started here. Okay, nutrients, what's that going to do to mTOR? Activate it. Oh, just kidding, I started with insulin. Okay, insulin is going to inhibit AMPK. On the other hand, nutrients, sorry, well, there we go. So nutrients, activating mTOR. Insulin, also activating mTOR, right? And we talked about that through what factors? IRS1, P10, PTK1, AKT, and overall activation of mTOR. Okay, we cannot have mTOR and AMPK on at the same time. So activation of AMPK leads to the inhibition of mTOR through what factor? Yep, right. Okay. Insulin, on the other hand, of course, activates mTOR. Okay. Well, we're just going to have to pick one because I don't remember where I started. Okay, so mTOR. We're going to be increasing the activity of S6 kinase. What am I decreasing the activity of? 4E binding protein, which there gives me more free EIF4E, which leads to an increase in what? Yep, protein translation. Okay, AMPK is going to do what to protein translation? Yep, we're going to see a decrease. Yes.
Decreasing activity of 4ABP the same thing with like phosphorylating it and making it dissociate?
Yes, exactly. So that was a good question. Decrease the activity of 4ABP, so I'm phosphorylating it, which allows it to dissociate from EIF4E. So same thing, synonymous there. Okay. Other effects of AMPK. What am I going to activate? Yep, macrophagy, and also, what else? Yep, fatty acid oxidation. Okay. What about insulin? What's insulin going to do to fatty acid oxidation? Decrease, right? I'm decreasing lipolysis. Okay, I think we went to feeding behavior next. So, what's AMPK going to do to feeding behavior? Okay, mTOR is going to obviously inhibit macroautophagy. We talked about OLP1. Yep, and then AMPK would increase feeding behavior. AMPK, I have a loss of nutrients. I want to make that up. I'm going to increase the exogenic pathways. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about lipogenesis. So what's insulin going to do? Increase. Oh, sorry. Again, insulin. Decrease the feeding behavior. There we go. Yeah.
Are you going to be posting this online?
Yes, for sure. But you won't be able to quiz yourself. You don't have any information. Okay. mTOR, what's it going to do to lipogenesis? Increase. Same idea, right? We're starting to undergo these anabolic effects. Okay, what's going to be my other activator of AMPK? Sirtuins, right? I'm going to increase AMPK activity. Okay, so this would make a great exam question, right? You might ask you, okay, start to derive these for me. Okay, now talk to me about other effects, and you would leave certain ones blank. Okay. Yeah.
Could you go back a couple slides? The one about sirtuins and insulin release. I guess you don't have to go back.
Okay.
It doesn't lie. So it inhibits UCP2.
Yeah.
And so ATP is made so you can't secrete insulin.
Decreasing ATP. So if you inhibit that proton, you can't keep this proton gradient, and you need that proton gradient in order to be able to produce ATP.
But I thought if you inhibit UCP, you keep the gradient.
That's UCP1, and we're talking about more full inhibition. So UCP1 and UCP2 act a little bit differently. UCP2 is through like homeostatic effects, and you always have to have some sort of proton gradient to maintain this charge to produce ATP. Okay, diabetes. Let's roar through this. So is DI common? Diabetes insipidus? No. What about type 1?
No.
Type 2?
Yes.
Gestational?
No.
4% is relatively high, but not compared to type 2. Modi? No, of course not. Underlying causes? Inability to conserve water. This is not our big one, right? So I'm not going to focus too much on that. Type 1 diabetes. I don't have endogenous insulin, right? I'm getting rid of my beta cells. Okay, type 2, we talked about insulin resistance, and we talked about all the pathways with that. Gestational? Yeah, we're talking about irregular hormones. So as we induce insulin resistance, this can be through progesterone or cortisol. So that's why, we talked about how obesity can stimulate like type 2 diabetes. Okay, and Modi, remember this is my single gene mutation. Okay, genetic versus environment. DI? Yep, genetic. Type 1? Both? Genetic is my predominant one. Type 2?
Environmental.
Both. Environmental is my dominant. Gestational?
Mostly environmental.
This is mostly environment. So you could have a genetic predisposition for type 2 diabetes, which would increase your risk for gestational, but overall it's environmental. It's induced by pregnancy. Okay, Modi is my monogenic. Okay, pathogenesis. We're not going to talk about DI. So type 1 diabetes, remember this is an improper action of my immune system. So I'm attacking beta cells. This can lead to death and overall no insulin. Remember, this is going to occur at a young age. So this is something that's relatively going to be, or can be diagnosed relatively early on. On the other hand, type 2 diabetes, especially if it's induced from obesity, can be diagnosed at a much older age. And remember all those complications we talked about? That can take up to a decade to develop. So type 2 diabetes really can take a long time before any clinical signs are going to show. So we talked about overload leading to insulin resistance, we talked about ER stress leading to insulin resistance, and we talked about inflammation. Overall, I'm going to try and overcompensate by producing more insulin, which leads to, first of all, more what produced? What's secreted with insulin? Yep, my amyloid plaque, and then which can deposit and cause cell death, but also just overall exhaustion. Okay, gestational we already talked about, and then Modi is just a disruption of beta cell function. So again, we come back to beta cell function in all types of diabetes. Okay, overall we talked mostly about ketoacidosis, which is a big hallmark of type 2 diabetes. So remember, I'm going to get ketone body production. Why? Why does this happen?
Cells.
think I heard all the parts there. So remember, as we develop insulin resistance, I'm not able to keep my free fatty acids from leaving my adipose tissue. As I get more and more free fatty acids, I'm kind of overwhelming this TCA cycle. Additionally, this TCA cycle is already using up all my oxaloacetate going into gluconeal. There's so many building blocks around. Okay, that means that these free fatty acids can't really enter, so they're going to be shuttled off, and one of the products that you get are ketone bodies. Remember, ketone bodies are acidic. So I'm going to go into an acidic state, which means my body's going to increase what system to counterbalance this? By bicarb buffer system. So that's why all of a sudden I'm going to start exhaling a lot of CO2, right? We talked about like fruity breath. Okay, that's kind of one of the hallmarks is ketoacidosis. Of course, my other hallmarks are always polyuria and polydipsia, right? Okay, microvascular chronic complications. We talked about the polyol pathway, so conversion of glucose over to fructose, and this is only in cells that express aldose reductase. So this is going to be like retinopathy, so in the my small blood vessels of the eye. I'm also going to be undergoing the production of AGEs or advanced glycosylated products. So in the presence of excess glucose, I can get a glycated protein, right? And this is fine, this happens all the time. However, if it keeps going, I'm going to get a mitidoride product, and ultimately I'll get these advanced glycated products. And this is dangerous, right? Because what do these do to cell membranes? More stiff, right? In addition, as it's more stiff, those crosslinks kind of form a net. So I'm going to catch any extra substrates that are coming my way. So in part, as I increase fructose, I'm also increasing through this pathway here, PKC. What's PKC going to do? Yeah, diacylglycerides, and I'm going to get all my byproducts. All of this is going to perpetuate this problem in my membrane, and I'm going to start seeing disruptances. Okay, insulin resistance. So normal insulin signaling, right? We talked about this whole phosphorylation cascade. I'm going to bind insulin. This leads to my phosphorylation event where IRS1 is going to be phosphorylated. PI3K can then bind, at which point this is going to phosphorylate a series of PIs, which then recruit PKB. This is going to undergo a conformation change, which then can lead and induce different effects. Okay, overall, your big key factor is IRS1. If IRS1 is previously phosphorylated, this is not going to bind during to the insulin receptor during insulin binding. Okay, we talked about different factors leading to insulin resistance. So we talked about inflammation pathway and activation of my stress kinase, so JNK and IKK beta. And JNK and IKK beta are going to phosphorylate my IRS1, which means it's no longer going to be responsive to insulin binding to the receptor. Additionally, we're going to get induction of NF-kappa B, which is a transcription factor, and it's going to transcribe things like TNF-alpha, right? All of my pro-inflammatory factors. Okay. We also talked about ER stress and insulin resistance. So your two big, we talked about 3 parts, but the 2 big ones he wanted you to take home were IRE1 and PERK. Okay, so in a normal state, I have free IRE1. In a stress state, I'm going to form this homodimer, which is then going to become phosphorylated. And this JNK, which we already talked about, is going to phosphorylate IRS1, and I have inhibition that way. But number 2, I also am going to get my cleaved form of XBP1, which then can translocate into the nucleus and induce the transcription of other stress proteins, okay? Number 2, we also talked about PERK. So again, activation of PERK, remember we talked about phosphorylating EIF2. What happens if I phosphorylate EIF2? Inhibition, right? I no longer am able to convert to my GTP bound state from GDP1. Okay, again, we get activation of NF-kappa B, so we have further inflammation. All right, insulin resistance and fat. So we talked about fat kind of having 2 faces. Yes, of course, there's anti-hyperglycemics, so we're getting leptin and adiponectin. What do these activate again? AMPK. On the other hand, I also get cytokines and other inflammatory factors like TNF-alpha. And so this can be a problem, right? This Too much of this can lead to insulin resistance through the inflammation pathways that we talked about. But additionally, free fatty acids, remember we talked about can stimulate gluconeogenesis, and we're going to lead to insulin resistance as we start overwhelming the system with inappropriate glucose levels. Okay, and we talked about really this with metabolic overload. So again, as I increase fatty acid circulation, I'm going to lead to an increase in PKC, which besides triacylglyceride is also involved in the synthesis of extracellular matrix proteins, which we talked about with ages. So again, we're going to start creating these disturbances along the membrane. Okay, overall then, decreased beta cell function. So how are we leading to this? Number one, we talked about an increase in insulin production is going to lead to an increase in my amyloid plaques. But in addition, we also get induction of apoptosis, like things through ER stress. Okay, great. Moving forward. So glucose cycling. What's my big take home from all of this? These are joined, right? I'm constantly going through this cycling pathway. I don't just derive glucose directly. I'm always going to cycle up through glycogen and back down. Does this always happen at a steady rate? No. What would influence that? Glycogen storage levels, but also what I just ate, right? So what would happen if I just woke up and then all of a sudden I ate my big hearty breakfast? I'm going to increase glycogen storage, right? Yeah, what about, because I've depleted my glycogen overnight. What about, when else would I see it? Immediately after eating? Or is there a delay? There's a delay with that, right? So if I eat I think Napoli's favorite example is if you're in a pie eating contest, right? Are you going to see it immediately get the storage? No, you're going to see maybe that 3 or 4 hours later as I start to bring it to stores. Okay. Okay. Flat versus fat. So white adipose tissue, we're talking about being unilocular. Basically, I'm inducing storage. On the other hand, brown adipose tissue, I'm going to be burning. How is it burning? UCP1. So we talk about having, as I increase this UCP1, I increase my proton leak. Instead, I'm going to be dispersing heat as opposed to ATP. I think this was part of the confusion. If you uncouple UCP2, if you're inhibiting this entirely, you don't get any of this proton leak, which means you don't have the gradient and you don't get ATP production. However, if you overproduce, then actually you're getting heat, and that's with UCP1. But there's always some sort of homeostatic UCP activity. Okay, so overall I'm getting heat, which means that brown adipose tissue then is going to be a very efficient way of dispersing energy, right? Okay, and we talk about calling this adaptive thermogenesis. All right, in terms of brown adipose tissue, how are we going to activate? We talked about cold weather, we talked about overeating, but not in an obese state, right? And this is going to activate brown adipose tissue. Additionally, what other group of substrates are going to activate beiging of white adipose tissue? Yeah, exactly. Catecholamines like epinephrine, cortisol, things like that. And I'm going to activate expression of UCP1, which is then going to lead to the activity of brown adipose tissue. Again, I'm not going to see brown adipose tissue if I'm in a fasting state, so if I have really low BMI or also in an obese state. Okay, we're finally to midterm 3, part 2. So we can go kind of quickly through this since you guys just had this stuff. Okay, overall, hypertension, so my ROS system. So number 1, I'm going to get release of renin as well as aldosterone, or angiotensinogen. This they're going to activate, I get angiotensin 1. Is this my active form? No, it's going to undergo a reaction within the lungs through the enzyme ACE, and I get angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 then, number 1, sorry, I thought I saw a hand. What's the first thing I want to do if I'm in a low blood pressure state? Constrict, right? It's then going to go on to stimulate the adrenal cortex, and I get release of aldosterone. Aldosterone then can go on, and we're also going to see holding on to sodium and water, so sodium and water retention, and a decrease of potassium, all with the goal of increasing blood pressure. Yeah.
Is that saying that angiotensin 2 and aldosterone are both like increasing all those factors of sodium, potassium, and water?
Yeah, both of these do that. Yep. But you do need angiotensin to just stimulate aldosterone. Okay. How could I end up with hypertension? Yeah, hyperaldosteronism. So if I am constantly stimulating the release of aldosterone separate from angiotensin 2, then this could lead to a problem. What if I were to treat that patient with like an ACE inhibitor? Would that do anything? No, it doesn't matter, right? Hyperaldosteronism is increasing the production of aldosterone separate of angiotensin 2. There's no regulation, which is how we get crazy hypertension. Okay, retinoic acid. So mostly we talk, retinoic acid is a great thing, right? It's going to induce basically every desirable metabolic effects that you could think of. But remember, retinoic acid is really has two different fates. So number one, if I'm binding to my thiazolic retinoic acid binding protein, I'm going to recruit it to RAR, which is going to lead to growth inhibition. But we talked about how that has basically the same overall results as if I were binding to the fatty acid binding protein, which stimulates my PPARs, which leads to proliferation. And we talked about that with, here we go over here. So number one, in terms of inhibiting growth, I'm inhibiting the production of white adipose tissue. So if I'm inhibiting the production of white adipose tissue, that's great. That's going to mean less storage, right? And in addition to this, if I'm activating my PPARs, I start to activate, where did I want to go with that? Overall, oh, here we go. We're going to also induce UCP1. So if I'm inducing